make somebody likable? Is it the way that they dress? Is it the lilt in their voice when they speak to you? Is it their just inherent charisma? What is it about people that make them likable according to personality psychology? Now, naturally, everybody wants to be more likable. It's just part of being human. Humans are inherently social creatures, and it makes sense that we want to be liked by other people. This is normal, okay? You don't need to be ashamed about wanting to be better liked. But who are the likable people? And I realize that this is an inherently very subjective question. I get that. However, there are things that we do know based on personality science that can kind of clue us in on who the likable people are. Where are they? Where are these mythical creatures? Well, they're not actually so mythical. They're actually, the people who exist all around us every single day. But if you are not one of those inherently likable people, can you yourself actually become more likable? We're going to talk about that too. Likability is very subjective. It's very cultural. It's not going to look the same way for every kind of culture, every kind of group, every kind of person, etc., etc. But there are some general things that we know about likability, at least from a westernized perspective. Let's look at the personality profile of a likable person. First and foremost, a likable person tends to be someone who is more sociable. I know this is kind of bad news for those introverts out there like myself, but this is what the science says. Likable people tend to be more sociable, and it does make sense because sociable people tend to interact more with others. They tend to be more gregarious, more outgoing. They tend to be happier kinds of people. They tend to have more friends, meaning they have more opportunities for people to actually get to know them and to find out that, hey, this person's pretty cool, I actually really do like them. They also tend to be pretty friendly, pretty easy to get along with. They don't make a lot of conflict. And the really important thing here is that likable people are not socially reclusive, so they don't just keep to themselves and never want to interact with anybody. And they're also not shy, so they're okay interacting with others in a not so socially awkward kind of way. The likable person also tends to be more reliable. We like people that we can depend on and trust. If there's this person who always fails us, they keep saying that they're going to meet us for coffee at the local coffee shop, and every single time something comes up or they're like an hour late, that's just not very attractive, is it? It can be hard to rely on that person to actually be there when we need them. So a likable person is somebody who we can trust to babysit our kids, or somebody that we can tell a secret to and know that they're not going to blab it to every person in the neighborhood. It's the person who, if you lend them money, they're actually going to pay you back. And there's no question about that. So the likable person also tends to be more reliable and more trustworthy. Likable people also tend to be more open-minded. They aren't threatened by the notion of you maybe having a different perspective than them. They're willing to consider other ideas, possibly even have their mind changed if an argument is good enough or enough new evidence comes out. They tend to be unjudgmental, more open of different perspectives and beliefs. They also find it easier to adapt to new situations, so if something crazy is happening in their life, it's not going to completely unravel them. And they tend to just be really approachable people who are easy to talk to because of this, because you don't have that fear of being judged. Likable people also tend to be more laid back. So stress, anxiety, all these negative emotions don't tend to affect them as much, which is great because as human beings, we tend to feed off of the emotions of those around us. It's just kind of a natural thing. Some people are more susceptible to this than others, of course, but if we're around somebody who's always stressed out, it's probably going to stress us out too. So it makes sense that a likable person is going to be more laid back. They let things just sort of roll off their shoulders, so to speak. They're going to be the voice of reason in a tense situation where everybody's getting anxious and riled up. They're going to be more stable, more predictable. You know what this person is going to do. They don't just suddenly go off their rocker when things go wrong and get really, really angry or upset. No, they tend to be pretty level-headed and stable. It's not hard to tell what this person is going to do emotionally. Likeable people tend to be more confident. They're sure of themselves, and if they have insecurities, well, they're not just putting those all out on display for everybody to see 24/7. Now, I do not mean that they are cocky, okay? This is very different. Confident people still understand that they have flaws, that they're not perfect. They might still have some insecurities because we are all human beings. They have what's called a healthy ego. Finally, in terms of a personality profile, a likable person understands the emotions of others. So they are in tune with their own emotions, and they can also figure out the emotional state of other people pretty easily. So these are not people who bottle up their emotions, never communicate, and when they have an emotional outburst, it really is an outburst. People who understand emotions will recognize the emotions that they are experiencing, and they're going to display them in appropriate ways. And they're going to understand how to deal with their negative emotions in a healthy way that doesn't encumber everybody else. And when other people are giving off emotional cues, they're better going to recognize how to handle those in an appropriate way. So you could call these people emotionally intelligent. So this is just kind of the general personality profile of somebody who tends to be more likable. But how did we get to this profile? What does it actually mean? Now, this is pretty interesting. When we take the average personality profile across a large group of people from a particular culture, we have what is called the average personality of that culture. What we tend to find is that people who are closer to that average tend to be more likable. So this profile that I'm describing is actually the average personality profile of a westernized culture. I know that when most people think of average, they associate that with something negative. But in this context, being closer to the average of a culture is actually associated with a lot of positive things, including being better liked. And there could be a lot of reasons for this. I mean, the average personality profile that I've described here does embody a lot of kind of healthy personality traits that help people function better in society. So it kind of makes sense that that sort of profile would be more likable. But it also fits with people's expectations of how a person is supposed to behave within a given culture or within a given context. So it makes people a little bit more predictable. They fit a little bit better with that particular culture if they're closer to the average personality profile. Now I know what you're thinking, okay? Isn't conformity a bad thing? Why should I want to be like the average person? I'm special, I'm different, I'm unique. And yeah, no, you're kind of right. And I will say that within any given culture, there's a level of conformity and a level of individuality and uniqueness that is expected. Depending on your culture, one may be valued more than the other. I know that within westernized cultures, we really tend to emphasize things like being unique, being different, being an individual. A certain level of individuality, of uniqueness, yes, is a very good thing, even within this average personality profile. You don't want to be so much like everybody else that you no longer stand out as an individual person, but you also don't want to be so different that suddenly nobody can relate to you, to where you are so much an individual that that level of individuality is way more unique than what most people tend to express within a culture. I also want to point out here that we tend to like people who are like ourselves. I'm an introvert, and I know that I tend to really like other introverts because they're not going to try to make me do things that I'm uncomfortable with, like going to parties every weekend, or texting 24/7, or socializing every hour of the day. You know, it's kind of a caricature of extroverts, but you get my point. I'm an introvert, so I like other introverts. I also like people who tend to value similar things to me, or who are like-minded to me. Maybe we have similar hobbies and interests. We like people who are like ourselves. If you've heard of the phrase, birds of a feather flock together, The same is true here when it comes to personality. So you can have a personality that is different than this average that I've described and still be likable to certain types of people. So not everybody is going to find the same stuff likable. This is what a lot of YouTube videos don't tell you. But what if you are trying to become more likable? Is it possible? Well, yeah, it is possible. Personality is not something that is rigid and fixed. It is something that changes and adapts over time as we grow and develop and we learn new things and we experience different things. Our personality is constantly changing. Now, with that being said, it's still a relatively stable concept, so you're not going to see changes to your personality that happen extremely quickly. So who you are today is going to be pretty similar to who you are tomorrow and next week and next year and so on, but there will be changes that happen over time, and you yourself can help to influence some of those changes in a direction that you would like to see them move. So if you think that you're just too shy and introverted, right, maybe to the point where you're just not really wanting to interact with people at all, that's something that you can work on. If you think that you're too close-minded, if you're not open to new experiences enough, that's also something that you can work on. If you think that your reliability just really isn't good enough, if you're always letting people down, good news, you can work on that. You can work on things within reason, so don't try to change everything about who you are. That's just unhealthy, and it's not going to work. And if you suddenly are putting on this facade of being a completely different person, where suddenly your personality's done a total 180, people are going to notice that. They might think you're being kind of fake, you're not being authentic. So don't try to do a whole 180. You don't need to do a whole 180 if you're trying to become more likable. Just work on those parts of your personality that you think really could benefit from a little bit of tweaking to where it's going to help you lead a healthier life. So if there is something specific that you want to work on, go for it. You absolutely can. Whether it's becoming more reliable or open-minded or whatever it might be, you can slowly start to alter your behavior to better fit with that particular personality trait. So if I am trying to become a more reliable person, I can try to train myself to be more on time for appointments, or reminding myself when I have something to do, setting things up in place to help me better embody that trait of reliability. I'll tell you a secret. Even the most likable person is not liked by all. They might be more likable, generally speaking, but that does not make them perfect. That does not make them likable by 100% of the population. So keep that in mind. You do not need to change everything about yourself, but if there are areas that you want to target, that you know maybe your life would be benefited by targeting those areas, then work on those areas specifically. I have linked in the description box down below a link to a blog post I wrote about this subject, and I included a couple more traits in that blog post, so definitely check that out. Like this video, ding that notification bell, subscribe if you're not already, and I will see you next time. Bye.